Great. So it's the top of the hour. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we're going to have some more people joining. My name is Maddie Watt. I lead the Hive think tank. And in the interest of time, I'm going to save what the Hive think tank does for the very end. And I'm going to let you guys know what we've got coming up next. During today's conversation, I will be dropping some links in the chat. So go ahead and click on those or save those in your browser for later viewing. And really quickly, I just want to tell you guys how to use the Q&A function because we love questions. We definitely want you guys to ask questions for our speakers. So to do that, please go ahead and click the Q&A button. It's located at the very bottom of your screen right underneath the video. And when you use the Q&A button, that helps for two reasons. Number one, it keeps all the questions in a nice clean place for our moderator. And number two, it allows you guys to upvote questions. So if you see a question that you like, go ahead and upvote it, and that will make sure to go to the top of the list and better chances to get answered. All right, so without further ado, we're going to kick off today's incredible discussion. And here is T.M. Ravi, the Hive's managing director, to tell you a little bit about what the Hive does.
Thank you, Matty. It's a great pleasure to be hosting this event today, along with my colleagues here. And so this is part of the Hive think tank, which is a thought leadership forum. And so the think tank has about 11,000 members. We host events, 3 or 4 events every month. Since March, we've been doing it on Zoom with great success. Last week, we did one on Blue Tech, next week on AgTech. So we are typically kind of technology focused. The Hive think tank is part of the Hive, which is a venture capital entity based in the heart of Silicon Valley in Palo Alto. And so we focus on leveraging data and AI to drive transformation across a broad set of industries. So we've had one IPO, Pinterest, 6, 7 other exits. And today I'm pleased to welcome my good friend and colleague, Pashu Christensen. Pashu used to work with us at the Hive in starting 2012, helped set up the Hive think tank. And it really is a great pleasure to be working with her again today. Pashu is co-founder of Externalities Watch. And today's topic on the big kind of opportunities and broken promises for technology is incredibly interesting. We're also pleased that we have both a US or North American kind of point of view, a European point of view. In a follow-up session, we hope to have some Asian friends, because there are indeed very different perspectives depending on where you live. And with that, I'd like to introduce Pashu.
Thank you, Ravi. Indeed, it's a great pleasure to actually work with you again and partner on this event. So again, my name is Pashu Christensen. I'm the co-founder of Externalities Watch. And it's a great pleasure to host you all from all corners of the world. Here we are in Marseille, in the south of France, in a unique innovation exhibition center called La Coque. So based in Marseille, Externalities Watch is a think tank addressing environmental and social externalities of innovation. And what we do is that we're enabling a cross-cultural, discipline discussion to find solutions through collective intelligence and to propose and to actually encourage best practices through capacity building. Our mission is to reduce externalities and take innovations towards more sustainability and more fairness. So what we're doing today is that we are launching this year-long series of webinars on the limits of technology. And once a month, with recognized institutions, we are partnering with them once a month to tackle different limits of technology, either environmental, cultural, political, cultural, and financial, and so on. So really, our goal here is to, our mission and our goal is to give this access to knowledge around tech. And so all the webinars that we are hosting are going to be accessible online, all the videos, all the written summaries. And based on all these discussions, at the end of the cycle, at the end of the webinar series, we're going to publish a final report in November 2021. So what we are doing here is really to bring critical thinking, collective intelligence, and diversity back into the debate. What we are doing is that we are opening and democratizing the discussion about technology. And if we can all agree on the many benefits that technology has today, there's no doubt about that, there is a rising concern, rising criticism against the tech industry. Among citizens, regulators, but also tech insiders themselves. You may have seen recently that documentary on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. So today there is a need, we are at a turning point where there is a need of an open discussion with all parties, including tech insiders. And so I'm really happy today to kick off this discussion and to kick off this series of webinars on technology's big dreams and broken promises. And this is a discussion for which we are partnering with the Hive in Palo Alto. And what we are doing is that we are enabling a transatlantic discussion on this very timely and sensitive matter. So it's my pleasure to welcome Stephanie. She's the co-founder of Externalities Watch, and together with our panel of speakers, thank you so much for being here from California, from Italy, from Brussels actually, and from Paris. Thank you all, and I'll meet you again for the Q&A session.
So thank you, Pachou. My name is Stephanie Resch. I'm an academic in international and comparative law. I'm specialized on new technology and sustainable development. So I'm here today with Tanya Shastri in Palo Alto, Vice President of Products Blockchain at VMware, and Andrea Glorioso in Brussels, Senior Advisor on Digital Policy for the European Commission, and Alexei Grinbaum, who is a physicist and philosopher at the French Alternative Energies and Atomic Energy Commission in Paris. We thus have a very diverse panel in terms of gender, cultural background, and expertise, as you can see. So Tanya, you are a half Indian, half American tech engineer with more than 15 years in Silicon Valley at C-level. So before joining VMware, you were you lead product management and go-to-market for the blockchain business unit. You headed strategic business development at Google. So you are the real tech engineer here. You are also an entrepreneur and co-founded a SaaS big data analytics platform called Natiro. Andrea, it's your turn. You are Italian and the principal policy advisor at the European Commission on digital policy. So you advise senior and top management on strategic issues related to digital policy, digital sovereignty, and distributed technologies such as blockchain, and the socioeconomic impact of digitalization across EU member states. So thank you. Alexei, you are Franco-Russian, a Franco-Russian intellectual with the unique perspective of combining science as a physicist in quantum mechanics and philosophy with your research in the ethics of new technologies. You are the author of the book Robots and Evil that I have here, that was published in 2019, where you analyze the question of responsibility in our relation to digital technologies and artificial intelligence. So why did we bring such a diverse panel here today? In fact, so because there's a real necessity to address the impression, and that's the question, the impression of unlimitedness in technological innovation. With the current demand on both sides of the Atlantic to set limits to the tech industry, or at least find some kind of a balance. So in fact, this question of limits is actually a question regarding what kind of society we want, and humanity that we want for our future. So the debate, we concentrate on the internal and external limits of new technologies in terms of, on the one hand, how far has technological innovation gone and will go in the future, and what for? And on the other side, what kind of control and limitation we need to consider. So these two aspects will drive the two parts of our discussion today. First, the three speakers, will have 7 minutes each to give their thoughts on the unlimitedness of technological innovation, either as an illusion, a reality, or a goal. And second, there's a roundtable that will be dedicated to the potential need to impose limits to technological innovation, and if so, what kind and who is responsible. Those are the two parts of the discussion. And finally, we'll reserve a Q&A session. So please, as Matty said, post your questions that we can answer them. So what is important today is to go beyond politically correct and to share our personal opinion in order to have a truly constructive debate. So that's really the objective today. For the audience to know, on purpose, we haven't had any preparation call. And in order to keep it natural and simple as possible. So let's start with you, Tanya, please. Please tell us what you think about the question of unlimitedness in technological innovation.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here and share my thoughts. Thanks, Stephanie, for that introduction. So, before I share my thoughts, I just want to share a little bit of context so you know kind of where my thoughts are coming from and the areas in which I have spent some time. So yes, I have spent probably my entire career and my education primarily in the technology space. The areas I have focused on are networking and telecommunications. So I studied that in my undergraduation and then also kind of more practically in the networking industry for 10 plus years. I spent quite a bit of time also and have interest in information theory and digital signal processing, which I did in my master's, as well as kind of translated in the areas of big data analytics, just generally data analytics, and then transitioned more recently into machine learning and AI. And then more recently also with kind of value exchange, right? As humans, we're trading all the way from bartering systems to how do we kind of exchange value with each other, and that more recently with blockchain and so on, the area I'm focusing on more currently. So all these areas, when I think about it, there's been an evolution long before even technology came into the picture, right? If you look at telecommunications or communication more broadly, remotely, there were things as a long time ago as smoke signals or our postal services and so on, right? So it's of course evolving now to things with like email and messaging systems and further. Whether we go to information theory, to the printing press, to now emails and social media and so on, right? And when I think of machine learning and AI, I kind of think also of automation and the intelligence of systems outside of what humans can do. And when you think about it, right, we've been doing these things way back when there were traps, right? The human being wasn't anywhere close to it, but they were able to kind of get an automated system to help them out, right? And now, of course, to things that are much more digital, right? So your lights turn off the moment you leave the house without you turning them off, for example, right? And then with value exchange, yes, we've gone from a bartering system to then having, some metals as coins or what have you to currencies and now digital currencies. So I'd say there's a natural evolution, and technology is the progression that mankind is on these specific ones at least. And yes, there's various things for us to consider, right? The rate at which changes is happening is faster. We are becoming more virtual, right? I mean, a bartering system, you actually held the things that you were exchanging versus now you may not know what's actually happening because it's so digital, right? So I'd say, I mean, the point I just want to share there is, I think there is a natural evolution. Technology is only the next step. And I think humans as a humankind is wanting to make progress and push things forward. And technology is the current mechanism for us to do that. So, you know, that's one piece and one area that I just wanted to share my thoughts on. The second, right, we've talked about things, you know, there's two sides of any coin. Yes, we all understand that there's value in technology and that there are good things coming from it. But I also think it's good to kind of have some real examples, right? And Ravi mentioned that we don't have an Asian a person on the panel, but I think I can play that role. I grew up in India. I spent, you know, my first couple decades there. I go back quite often, and you know, things like a cell phone, right, is still currently has a big impact on so many people's lives. An example is, you know, the vegetable and fruit vendors who typically would just sit the whole day on the roadside waiting for someone to come and purchase things from them, right? And it's produce. It goes bad if they didn't sell everything by the end of the day. It wasn't great for them. Now with a cell phone, their lives have changed quite tremendously. They can not only take payment on that cell phone without requiring anything. They're very entrepreneurial, very enterprising, really driving that technology, something called Paytm, for example, that's doing phenomenally well. So, and that small device, now they have access to so much information. You know, access to information is a big barrier, I think, for society generally, right? Those with access to information had a much better opportunity versus those who didn't have access to information. And now, you know, cellular technology, and I'm saying cell phone even over the internet, right? Of course, the internet and all that framework had to be set up, but having this small screen even has, you know, provides so much access, right? So maybe even more on a personal level, right? I remember growing up, my mother was Finnish, and her parents and family in Finland, we had to kind of sit around the phone and book a trunk call. And then someone had to physically make some connections. And then we were on the call, and, you know, maybe once a month or even once during holiday season, we'd talk to them, right? And sometimes that trunk call wouldn't go through because fast forward 10, 15 years. And when I moved to the US, I was able to call my parents. It was an expensive call, and I had to think about how much I could talk to them. And now, you know, maybe another decade forward, and I can be in touch with my aunt in Finland every day. We are on a messaging chat, and you know, we're able to stay in touch so much better, right? So the connectivity, both on a personal level as well as kind of more broadly for very many, you know, large number of people is interesting. There is, of course, the flip side to it, right? How much time do we spend? Are we stuck to our screens? Are we, you know, able as individuals to make the right choice, even when we know the right choice is not to be stuck to our screens, right? Those are all important questions that you know, would be great for us to address. But you know, I'll take another example, which is probably you know, easier to debate, one of advertising, right? Where yes, it is interesting when each of us are making a choice or making a decision to be shown a particular advertisement or several in the same area. So we can make an educated choice. We can get the best product that is best for us. But then when it transitions into a mode where you are being, I shouldn't use some strange words, but I will anyway. You're being put into a situation where it's difficult to leave, right? You are in a place where things are so entertaining, maybe even that you want to stay. And the only reason to do that is really to share more advertisements that maybe aren't interesting to me at the moment. Right now, it becomes so why is this happening? What's the driver for this? What is the value being generated? Who is benefiting from all this, and is it worth humankind's effort, you know, to do this, right? So these are, I'd say, big questions for us as we have this conversation here today. I will say though, you know, things like artificial intelligence, right? there is a concern that this artificial intelligence or will be able to do so much that humans do today that it's difficult for us to have a place in our own world, right? I think again there's two sides to that coin, right? Just maybe a few days ago, DeepMind said they were able to crack a 50-year-old protein folding problem, right, which has a lot of implications to mankind, right? I mean, there's a lot of neurological disorders that we might be able to have solutions to thanks to this kind of discoveries and so on. And then on the flip side, when I call for some help to some place and it's a chatbot responding to me, it isn't the most pleasant experience. But those are things that are helping us to get where we need to go in a way that I'd say there are benefits in a big way. The downsides are questions for us as a whole, right? Throughout and when I started the conversation, we've been on this journey, right? And I'd say humankind is pushing the boundaries all the time, right? And is artificial intelligence just another step in that journey? Are we as humankind always wanting to, once we've done something, we want to figure out how that can be done more simply, more straightforward, and we're kind of pushing the boundary for the next, where do we want to go next, right? I'd say the things on a personal level that I think about a lot are the rate at which that change is happening is only getting faster. What does that mean to my kids, for example? What do I tell them as they are developing their approach to life? Do they need to be able to retool and do 3 different careers within a lifetime, right? Because things are changing so quickly. Things that they've learned in school today, of course, help them to learn, but maybe they have to have a completely different approach. May that be a very good thing, right? They aren't stuck in one thing their whole life. They get to do many different things, right? So there are several things like that I think of. The aspect of
Tanya, I need to go on with the Andrea. So if you could just conclude, yes, that would be great.
Thanks for keeping me on track. The one thing I will say, and let's talk about who should spend some time on this. But the one thing I'll add, and hopefully in just a minute, is a very spiritual friend of mine actually said that technology is helpful for humankind to see how connected we are with each other, and that kind of was a surprise to me. It stayed with me quite a bit. The concept of the cloud, we're all putting our things up into a single cloud. We can all be connected in so many ways. The economy already does that to us. We're all connected through the economy, but even more so. And things like quantum physics and so on. Actually, for me, I think I have to be spiritual to be able to kind of even acknowledge that those concepts are real and can materialize in practical ways, right? So that's maybe the way I'll close. And thanks, Stephanie, for keeping me on track.
Thank you, Tanya. Andrea, can you please tell us what you think about unlimitedness in technology or technological innovation, and if you think it's an illusion or a reality, actually?
Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you all for being here, for having me to share some of my thoughts on these very important discussions. And when Stephanie and Pashu contacted me for this conversation, I think they kind of told me that they were interested in my perspective because it was a bit atypical for an official of the European Commission, which is true. And so let me say that what you're going to hear is probably not what you would normally hear from somebody working for the European Commission. And I also want to stress and underline that what I'm going to say is not necessarily officially the position of the European Commission. It is certainly mine, and it's a position that I argue also within the European Commission. But let's keep in mind that important distinction. So when I started to think about the question that Stephanie posed, and especially the question about the limits, one thing that I started to think very deeply about is how it is that we're having this communication breakdown about technology. And I'm saying that as somebody who, before joining the European Commission, I started working for the Commission as a civil servant 13 years ago. But before that, I actually was in the private sector. And as a matter of fact, the very first company that I worked for when I was much younger than I am today, was actually a company from Silicon Valley. So I came to interact with the mindset, with the tech mindset of Silicon Valley very early in my career. And also, I had the opportunity, luck in some cases, less so in others, but I had the opportunity to also get to know quite well the mindset of that you can see very clearly in the tech sector, not only Silicon Valley, but particularly in Silicon Valley. And many years afterwards, I kept on wondering how it is that we don't seem to understand each other. When we actually enter into conversation about technology, and this was also my experience, by the way, I served for 4 years as a diplomat in the United States, and one of my jobs was to talk to the tech sector in the US. And even though I think we made progress, I still found this difficulty in interacting with each other and understanding each other. And I need to spoil the surprise. I don't have an immediate answer to that. But I do think that part of the issue is linked, and maybe it's my Catholic upbringing, is linked to the concept of sin. And I will explain it in a moment. Now, many of you will know who Robert Oppenheimer was, one of the fathers of the atomic bomb. And I'm sure Alexei knows him very well, but others would as well. And Oppenheimer is famous for many, many things, but if you check on Wikipedia, one of the things that he's certainly famous for is that apparently on the first test of the atomic bomb, when the bomb actually exploded, and keep in mind that at that point, nobody really knew what to expect. Nobody really knew what would be the effect of the explosion. Oppenheimer is known to have said, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds, which comes from Hindu mythology. And that's what he's known for outside the restricted circle of people who follow these things. But actually, what I always like more, if one wants to take sentences a bit out of context, Oppenheimer wrote something else, who was a supporter of the atomic bomb, by the way. A couple of years afterwards, after the war, Oppenheimer said and wrote in his diaries the following sentence, which I found always very interesting, which is referring to that moment. The physicists, the scientists have known sin. With the use of the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the physicists have known sin for the first time. And this is a knowledge that they cannot lose. And I found, maybe again because of my Catholic upbringing, and if you're Catholic, you know the sin plays a very important role in our education, but this notion that those scientists at some point understood the effects, the moral and ethical effects of what they have been working on, and they could not choose not to see that effect anymore. They could not choose to forget that effect. Led me to think, are tech workers, and by tech workers, I mean everybody working in technology. That would include me, because I work with technology, I interact with technology. Do tech workers know sin? Do they understand the effects? Do they ask themselves, what are the effects of these technologies that they're working on? And it might seem very audacious in a way to compare digital technologies to the atomic bomb, but I don't think it is, because in many ways, in my view, in much the same way in which the development and the first use of the atomic bomb defined a new era, completely redefined power relations, the way we as human beings saw each other, saw our role in the world, including the possibility that we could not exist in this world anymore. It completely changed our approach to life. I do believe that digitalization, in much the same way, is changing our approach to life, our understanding of our own role in the world. And by the way, to open and close brackets very quickly, both technology are very intimately linked to military use in different ways, obviously, but that link is there. Now, if we go back to the questions, do tech workers or technologies, do they understand sin? Do they ask themselves if they have sinned, or outside of Catholic metaphors, do they ask themselves about the effects of what they're doing? I think another thing to keep in mind is our societies, this is true for all human societies, as they become more complex, they unavoidably tend to hide complexity. So if I were to ask yourselves if any of you knows what actually happened when you open the tap of your running water in your house, I would guess that 99% of the people who are listening now don't. They don't know. Neither do I, by the way. There is a whole amount of complexity going on so that we can have at least in Europe, in the US, and in other countries, we can have running water. So it's not a problem per se that societies, as they become more advanced, as they evolve, they develop more complexity and they need to hide that complexity. But the question I think we need to ask ourselves is, how much complexity can we hide? How much complexity is it reasonable and sustainable to hide? Because there comes a moment in which by hiding complexity, we are hiding our own sins as people who work on technology, who develop technology. And by the way, I'm not arguing, I'm not saying that every person working on technology or every tech company is willfully not asking these questions, is willfully not thinking about sin or about complexity or about effects. I think some are, to be entirely honest. I think that some out there are absolutely aware of the effects of the technology that they're developing. It's just that they are extremely lucrative, and so they make a choice in that direction. But I don't think that is the majority. But then we need to ask ourselves, why is it that the vast majority of people working in technology act so surprised now that we are seeing the effects of technology, which in insight are not new? And if you read a lot of research of the past 20, 25 years, a lot of these effects on many different fields were quite predictable and predicted. So I leave you with that question, which is a question that I ask myself, and I think I have this sense that this is a key to answering the underlying question, why do we have the communication breakdown? Now, if I have 2 more minutes, I'm looking at Stephanie to make sure that I'm not running out of time. I don't have 2 more minutes. I wanted to say something else, but then I will leave it for after for the conversation and discussion, and I will close with these 2 questions that I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. So Alexei, I guess now it's your turn with the philosophy and morals aspects of what Andrea just said.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. And just to start this discussion, I brought here a book by Horace of poems of the Roman poet Horace. And you may know that Horace lived both before Jesus Christ and before Steve Jobs. So he did not have a cell phone. He couldn't ask the question of sinfulness, as Andrea just said, in our Christian terms. But he was already worried about ethics of complex technologies. And there's a famous poem by Horace, the 3rd ode in the first book of Odes, where he's taken an example of something that man cannot naturally do, that he needs technology for. And he takes that example, and this is not using WhatsApp communication, right? Not using cell phones, but seafaring, crossing the waters on boat. And he takes that example as a case study to develop a philosophy of technology. And of course, we will not read the full poem in Latin here, but let me remind you one famous line from that poem, and that line speaks about limits. That line is the following one. Horace says about man, about humankind, nil mortalibus ardui est. Nothing is too arduous, too difficult for humans. He says, well, man has learned to build homes. Man has learned to cross the waters. Man has learned to communicate at a distance between India, Finland, or the United States. There will be no limit to that, he says. In this poem, he says, man will go as far as stealing, taking from Jupiter his thunderbolts. So in terms of technology, it seems, there is no limit. And that for Horace was a problem. In this very poem, Horace actually makes a judgment. He says, this is folly, this is madness. He says, that is something terribly wrong about humans. But can we say that today in the way Horace said it 2,000 years ago? And that kind of judgment on technology, that because there is no technological limit, no material or physical limit, you want to go and take the thunderbolts from Jupiter, well, develop technology for that, sooner or later you'll be there. Is that the same way we look at technology today? And that connects for me with a phrase I read from GPT-3 a couple of months ago. You may know that GPT-3 is this very advanced text generation software from OpenAI. It wrote, by the way, among many other things, it wrote an article in the Guardian newspaper in September by itself, in which it said, "I know I will not be able to avoid destroying humankind." You know, this is what thunderbolts are for. When Jupiter sends his thunderbolts, they actually destroy things, right? They're humans. And GPT-3 joins at that Jupiter position. It says, he or she or it, whatever you like, it says, well, yeah, I will not be able to avoid destroying humankind, but why is that? Not because humans have this unlimited technology, but because that means the software, will be programmed by humans to pursue misguided human goals, and humans make mistakes. So the evil part in this question of unlimitedness, if you like, is not so much in the absence of limit. It's not so much in the material part of technology, but in the humans themselves. Humans make mistakes. Humans sometimes define goals and purposes that are not necessarily beneficial. And that is very human, if you like. So that is something that is part of us. How in that context are we going to judge technology? Is the very unboundedness of our technological ambition something inherently bad? And I don't think so. There is a way to judge technology which is different from Horus, I think, today. The question of limits has to be complemented by something about humans, because evil doesn't live in the material world. There is no morality out there in GPT-3. It has no ethics. It's not a human agent. It's not a moral agent. Morality is in humans, but how can we relate our human morality with this question of limits of technology? And here, I'm going to call for another helper, for my third and last helper for today. And I will use a very strange and indeed puzzling quote from a great rabbi, from Adin Steinsaltz, who died recently. Adin Steinsaltz was a great rabbi, a Talmudist, who wrote not only about religion and religious studies, but also about technology, about our world affairs. And at some point, Steinsaltz says, you know what was the fault of Adam? And Andrea just pronounced this word, sin. Of course, when we think of sin, when we think about the problem of good and evil in humans, we think about this biblical metaphor of Adam and Eve. And Steinsaltz says, you know what the fault of Adam was? And you guys all know, right? He ate from that apple and so on. And Steinsaltz says, no. The fault of Adam in eating was that he was too hasty. So rather than saying that the moral judgment belongs with unlimitedness itself, I would say moral judgment belongs with the speed with which we go there. If we go there too fast without taking the time to think about the consequences and the meaning of what we're doing, yes, that is definitely terribly wrong. Horace used this phrase, vetitum nefas. In French, in Italian, in Romance languages, nefas or nefast is a word that is used, by the way, to really condemn something in the way Christians use the term sinful. So this is the same word for the Romans as sinfulness is for those who follow Judeo-Christian religion. So that fault is not so much in the ambition of going to some new unbroken ground, but in going there too fast, in being too hasty, not taking the time to think and reflect. Spontaneous answers are the worst ones. So that is what I have to say about the connection between unlimitedness, technology, our judgment about technology, and finally the question of velocity, of speed which I think bears directly on morality much more than the question of limits.
Thank you, Alexei. Well, I didn't think we will go that far, but thank you. So I think to sum it up a little bit, we've been talking about religion and sin and also evil in a way. And another key issue was the rhythm of it, of going into that direction. So actually the question we can ask now for that roundtable regarding limits and what kind of limits we can set is the consequences of this technological evolution or this technological innovation. So one aspect that, to go back to Andrea, what you said regarding Robert Oppenheimer is actually one of his colleagues, so Friedman Dyson. I don't know if you heard about him, but he was also one of the creators of the atomic bomb. And he said, I'm quoting, regarding the term he used is technological arrogance. And what he says is, I quote, the glitter of technological innovation is something that gives people an illusion of unlimited power. And it is in some ways responsible for all our troubles. This is what you might call technical arrogance that overcomes people when they see what they can do with their mind. So it's this term, technological arrogance, that I'm not the one that created that word. It's a physicist that created the atomic bomb, or one of the creators of the atomic bomb. And so actually this question goes to you, Tanya. What do you think about this glitter, actually, of technological innovation? We can see, I mean, I think it's the same in all intellectual domain. There's something that, there's some aspect of passion. And I think for engineer, scientists, there is this passion that actually sometimes you don't see the consequences. You're talking about sin, Andrea, and also you, Alexei, but the question of consequences. And I would like to ask you, Tanya, did you ever feel this? And can you see this maybe in the Silicon Valley or in the tech engineer sector, this glitter and maybe arrogance also linked to it?
Yeah, I guess I will put it in two different ways, right? And a bit personal on my end, but also more generally, there is certainly the glitter or the intellectual stimulation or the enjoyment for technology just for the sake of technology, right? Irrespective of where it's going, what it's doing, who is it, helping or not helping, right? So there is that aspect of just the fact that it's very interesting, right, for our intellectual and mental stimulation, right? So that absolutely, I'd say no doubt that plays a big role. Andrea, Alexei, the conversation here and tying it, Stephanie, a little bit to what you're saying about the arrogance as well as the ability to foresee that there is there could be a poor outcome. I will say generally, and I'd say by and large, we are able to convince ourselves maybe, or be able to see it in a light where this is actually more helpful than it is damaging. That's one. And second, that, in a way, right, it is a tool. And I think very much to what Alexei is saying, the morality is at the end of the day with the humans who either use it or what they do with it, the implications of it. I would argue actually, and I'm arguing in a way that we have to see where humankind is today. It isn't like I am not here when we didn't have boats, when we were still doing things that were very, I'd say, natural to all mammals, right? So we have evolved a lot. There is a lot of complexity already today on top of which we are stacking what we're doing, right? So when you think of it in that context, it is, when we are here, what can we do and how can we do it, right? So I think there are various ways to look at it. I don't think at all anyone in the technology space is thinking of what we are doing like an atom bomb. No, we're not at all going that far. But I will say on the flip side, absolutely, especially more recently, there is a lot more thought, especially around the social implications of social media, around what the implications are to humanity at large, about the information bubbles, right? Information is great, but having those bubbles is we can't talk to each other then because we don't understand each other. What's the point in being connected when you don't understand each other because you're in your bubble? So all those things are very much front and center for the people working in those industries, and those are questions. I have friends working in several of these companies even today who struggle with it themselves, with the teams that they are working with, and so on. So yes, it is certainly part of it, but I'd say the intellectual stimulation, the fact that we're already stacking up on a current set of complexities that the world lives on, the fact that all these things have both a good side and a bad side, and we're definitely looking at the good side and hoping that that's going to be the bigger benefit to humankind, right? I guess those are, if I were, again, and I should preface everything I say, this is my personal views, right? That's all I can share today, but that's how I see it.
Thank you, Tanya. So maybe to go back on this glitter or arrogance, and the question maybe of losing track with common good. I think maybe that's something that people are worried about regarding the tech industry. Either they are regulators or citizens, users, and even parents also for their kids. The fact that, there were promises about the tech industry. And today we can see, as you said, the side effects of it. So has the tech industry lost track? And sorry, Andrea, maybe you can answer. Thank you.
Yeah, drink some water, Stephanie. Take good care. Take good care of your voice. Before I react to that point, Stephanie, let me just say to Tanya's point that many in the tech sector don't think of themselves as building an atomic bomb. And I don't want to push the comparison too much because there are obvious differences, but it's actually pretty interesting that if you read the documentation, we have the diaries, the letter exchanges of many, many scientists and people working on the Manhattan Project. The vast majority of them did not actually realize what they were doing. It was just a tiny minority who actually had the complete view and perspective of what was happening. So I don't think this is a particular defect of the tech sector. It's very human to just focus on the specific issue that we are solving, we have to solve in that particular moment. But we should be aware of that. The fact that we don't think of ourselves as being something larger and potentially more dangerous or what we're doing right now, well, history has taught us that we should pay attention to that because our own understanding of what we're doing is always quite limited. On your point, Stephanie, has the tech sector lost track? I think I have to say, and I say this with all the possible respect I have for the United States, which is a country that I'm still very close to also for personal reason. I got family there. I think that in many ways, the promises of the tech sector were believed more in the US than they ever were in Europe, quite honestly. I think that perhaps because of, or in our countries, but think about Europe, which is the part of the world that I know best. I think that in a way, we have always been fairly less ready to believe about many of the promises of the tech sector because just of our own history, of our own cultural traditions, and for a lot of other reasons. But having said that, yes, the tech sector has overpromised, probably, surely, and is now kind of course correcting, trying to find a new place for itself. What I think, and this is also to try to answer to some of the questions that I see coming up on the Q&A panel, I think some of those are really great questions. When I discuss with my counterparts in the tech sector, and that happens quite often, whether in Europe or in the US or other parts of the world, I try to, my position is always, let us not discount arrogance too much. Arrogance can be useful. And I don't think that human societies would have evolved, we as human beings, we would have evolved the way we have if not for our arrogance, if not for this belief that many of us have that we can do more than what we're doing right now. That's an arrogant way of thinking, to think that you can make a step further. Probably the first monkey who ever had the tool in its hand was considered arrogant by other monkeys for wanting to do something more than the rest of the pack. where I think, and to go back to some religious language, there is a certain difference between being arrogant and what the ancient Greeks called hubris, which is a word that has many different meanings. But one meaning, which is quite specific to that period of history, hubris was this a wrongful action against the divine order. And there are two important elements here. One is the wrongful. Hubris is something that happens when you do something that you know is wrong. There is no possible, question that what you're doing is wrong. And it's not only something that you do wrong against another human beings, it's something that you're doing wrong against, well, the ancients talked about the divine order. I think we can look at it against the social order, against each other. And I think that's where we have to put the line. Arrogance in terms of wanting to go one step further, I think it's fine. I think it's very good, actually. And if we can do what we're doing right now, talking to each other through a network of networks, is because of human arrogance. So let's not discount that. Hubris is a different thing. Hubris is when we or somebody willfully does something, knowing that it's wrong, and knowing that that action will have negative impacts on other human beings. And that's where I think we should focus our attention, and we should focus the conversation. And then once we have identified that, which is not an easy conversation, by the way, but once we have identified that, then maybe we can go some steps further. I think you're still muted, Stephanie. Yeah.
So continuing on this, maybe Alexei, with your both background, actually, do you think here there's a question of education? The fact that why? So you think what you say, Andrea, is that we don't understand each other. Maybe the tech sector, tech engineer who don't really know actually that they are doing something bad, or they are pursued that they are not doing something bad. And Alexei, I would like to know, with your both background, you also studied in the US, so you really have this cultural diversity and knowledge also. And I would like to know if you think actually it's related to this, to maybe critical spirit that is maybe not thought, I don't know, or lack of moral thinking or philosophy in scientific education. What do you think about that, Alexei?
I think it's not connected to culture, but it's connected to the very nature of the pursuit of knowledge. Look, let me take a simple example. What happens usually when you run an experiment, a physical experiment, or when you start writing computer code? And Tanya will know something about that, right? So, you know, you're writing computer code. What happens usually? Well, usually the answer is usually it does not work. And you're mad about it. It just doesn't work. You find errors over errors, you debug it, and you know, sometime at 4 a.m. in the middle of the night, it finally starts working, and you're happy. You're filled with enthusiasm. You just want to see how far that can take you, right? So you go till the end of that. You see what the result is going to be. You're filled with that emotion and that ambition too. And these are good things. That's how we build things. That's how we also gain knowledge in science. It doesn't mean that you're unable to ask all the ethical or social or other questions. It means that simply being filled with that enthusiasm, and there are many Greek words for that too, is a condition, is a part of human nature or human condition, if you like, that is conducive to gaining knowledge and to making things, both of these things actually. So this is not cultural, but this is very human. Now the question is, once you've gotten that result, before you start creating irreversible consequences for the others, will you take the time to think? Will you take the time to reflect about what that might mean for the others, for society, once you unleash these irreversible consequences on them? So I would very much stay with the engineer, with the scientist and the engineer. Their ambition, their enthusiasm are fundamental. We should not be trying to erase those things. We should be trying to preserve and enhance them. And at the same time, we should be thinking about instruments and measures. This is something that the European Commission calls responsible research and innovation. Andrea will know that term very well, I guess, right? We should be thinking about institutional measures and instruments so that the individual scientist will be able to fully realize their ambition and enthusiasm, but the whole structure, the whole institutionalized technology or science will be able to take that time to reflect and think. So I'm not saying that everybody, instead of writing computer code, should be reading philosophy books. I'm saying let people write computer code at some point if they want it, if they really feel like doing this work, if they're happy about it, that's what they should be doing. But the whole institutionalized science and technology should be somehow allocating time for reflection and anticipation. How do we do it is a difficult part of it, of course, right? And we saw many examples. We saw a Chinese scientist doing gene editing just out of pure ambition. We saw different other examples with artificial intelligence technology too. So the difficult part of it is, how is translating these very political and even consensual, I should say, ideas about technology and science into something operational and practical at the level of a company or a research organization. And that is hard. But that in itself does not depend on your culture. It is the same problem. Maybe the solutions will be different in the US, in Europe, in Asia, in Russia, in other parts of the world. But the very task of reflection and anticipation is the same for all of us, because science and technology are the same for all of us.
You're on mute, Stephanie. We can't hear you. Mm-hmm.
So based on this and also what you said before, Tanya, the fact that, so it's a human thing, it's not the responsibility or the technology, it's just an instrument actually. And here we're talking about shared responsibility. And I would like to know actually, Alexei, you're saying that we should put measures or instruments actually to maybe, I would call that maybe impact assessment or something like that. But who let technology or tech giants become what they have become? And we are maybe all responsible for that, and to always put the burden on the tech giants or the tech engineering and things like that. I would look to know what your perspective on this. Do you really think it's always the big tech that is responsible for that? We're talking about tech engineers that should consider the consequences of what they're doing. But maybe it's not just that. What about citizens? What about regulators in Europe that have led that? What about regulators in the US that have led that? What do you think about that, Tanya?
Oh, that question is for me, yes. My honest opinion here, right, and maybe this is again going back a little bit to what Alexei is saying, right? There are people doing things with a very different perspective, right? And we need to get those perspectives together. I will argue, right, we can say that the tech industry should, it can, it must, but I don't think we should expect that the tech industry by itself can do all the right things, right? And there is a lot of help and support system required for folks who are spending the time and thinking through this to educate, to inform, at all levels of society, right? Not just the tech industry, it is the users of the technology, it is kind of how those implications, what are the ripple effects across, it starts here, but what happens beyond, right? It is not easy for everyone to be fully educated on everything or to be able to spend the time to do it, right? And you might have a viewpoint that is not complete, and that's in a way I'd say natural, right? So I'd say that the should versus can versus must, and who does it. I'd say there is, it's hard for me to say that the users should, right? That means you're asking the billions of users to all be fully educated, which is asking too much. Can the educators get their education message when there is so much information out there, right? So it's certainly a difficult question to answer. And certainly, you know, I like the concept or the thought around the rate, and are we moving too quickly before we think through what those implications are, I think is certainly one way to at least start approaching the topic, right? Let's create a way for the industries, the regulators, the users to all set aside some time at least to think through these things, right? And is there some way for us to start doing things like that? I think would be interesting.
Thank you. What about you, Andrea, if you can answer that question about the responsibility and maybe the fact that it's time for the regulator, and regulators are starting to do that, but maybe to impose limits, what they haven't been doing for quite a long time.
To be entirely honest, I think that I would slightly disagree with the premise of your question, Stephanie, because at least as far as the European Union is concerned, I think that we have been regulating quite a lot in this space, keeping into account that regulation is a very delicate beast to tame. One has to be very careful. It takes time. We cannot predict ourselves all the consequences of it. But I'm not so sure that there is a lot more that from a regulatory point of view, we should do what we should do more. But, and this is not to pass the hot potato to somebody else, but it is a factual reality. Where we still have gaps, and that is very clear, is in the enforcement of the regulation. It is very easy to ask for new laws, new rules, new regulation, knowing perfectly well, allow me to be a bit blunt here, allowing perfectly well that once you ask for new regulation, that's a perfect opportunity for lobbyists to step in. Lobbying is a very noble job, there's nothing wrong with it, but tactically, a lot of organizations ask for more regulation because they want to delay. And you know perfectly well that once you start opening up the Pandora's box on new regulation, it can take years before you get to the end. The question that nobody or fewer people ask is, what can we do with the regulatory framework that we already have? Because that then raises a number of other inconvenient questions, such as how much money is being allocated by each country of the European Union to its privacy regulator. Because Germany gives a lot of resources to its privacy regulator. Other member states, which I will not mention out of respect, let's say it's an island, west of another island up there, devotes a lot less resources to its privacy regulator, and one can start wondering why is that the case. So on this point, I would really insist that let's not make the mistake of rushing to new regulation. Let's first look at what we can enforce in terms of the regulation we already have. And if I may just very briefly, I really don't want this to be confrontational and certainly not personal to you, Tanya, because you know, I'm sure you don't represent the whole tech sector in the war. Yes, it's but you know, unfortunately for you, I'm here the bureaucrat and you are the private sector, so we need to play a bit that role. Because yes, the tech sector does not and cannot have all the answers. Fair enough. But in my experience, and it's a sector I love very much, I think it has done a lot of good things for humankind, but I know of no other private sector which has sold itself in the way that the tech sector has done as the savior of humanity. If you go and talk to a car manufacturer, the car manufacturer will tell you, I want to sell you a bloody car. That's what they do. They don't tell you, if you buy the car, we will solve humanity's problem, or we will have democracy, or we will solve all these cultural and social issues, which is exactly what a large part of the tech sector has been doing. Maybe not your company, Tanya, but a large part of the tech sector has been doing. So I think that there I need to also push back a little bit. The tech sector, at the very least, I would expect the tech sector to recognize that maybe they have bitten a little more than they could chew, and then we can start a conversation on who should take responsibility for moving forward, which probably would be a collective effort anyway.
Andrea. So maybe we'll go now to the question and answers, because there are quite a lot.
Yeah, well, I was going to say something about that.
Go ahead, Alexei.
Yes, please.
So one thing that I think everybody on this panel should, well, everybody on the panel and in the audience should understand is that rules are not enough. And in most cases, rules will only work when a technology is already out there on the market, when we understand what this is about, what the consequences might be, when some product has been created. There are a lot of things that people in parliaments and all the legal offices have never even heard about that are happening in the labs today. In the labs, computer labs, physical labs, biology labs, all sorts of labs. There are plenty of things that are not out there yet. The society doesn't know about it, and yet these things will come out and change the way we live. So rules, and I always teach my students this insufficiency of rules on the example of CRISPR, of gene editing technologies. Every few months they were trying to draw a new red line just to see that red line being crossed after a couple of months, and then another red line, and it crossed again, and another red line, and crossed again. So deontology, setting more rules, is not enough to regulate the way science influences society. What else is needed? Well, we were trying to think about this thing with my postdocs and students, and we wrote a paper about something we call the division of ethical labor. I think you've all heard about the division of labor. This is the division of ethical labor. It's not only about setting rules, it's about creating a reflective process with the designers, with the engineers, with those who start these projects, before you go to the final stages of putting a product on the market, when everybody suddenly understands that it might be too late, So this reflective process, this division of ethical labor, has to enter inside companies and research organizations. And we do have these examples, including Silicon Valley, by the way. We do have people today at Google or Facebook who are at least trying to think about ethical issues. I'm not saying they have perfect solutions or even they have solutions, but I am saying that there are people who are concerned with ethics. We did see on the example, for example, of GPT-3, of this text natural language processing software from OpenAI, that they were concerned with misuse, they were concerned with bias. We've all heard about bias in training data for AI, and so on. So these are very operational questions that need to go down there on the operational level in the companies. This is not something that can be solved by a legal injunction because it might be too late. So rules, okay, why not? But definitely not only rules. And be very, very lucid about those parts of this whole chain where rules will not apply, because these new unbroken territories are not territories of law yet. There is no law there yet. Yet there is science and there is technology coming.
Thank you, Alexei. Well, I think we could continue the discussion quite a bit, but we'll ask questions so that we can answer the audience.
Yes, sure. So first, there's been a lot of questions online and a lot of discussion. So it means that it's a debate that we needed to have and that we'll continue having. I'll take one first question. We've had many questions. So Clay Lambert, he asked a lot of questions. So I'm going to take one of your questions, Clay. And actually, it is actually also interesting to us at Externalities Watch, because we are trying to democratize and open the debate about tech. So how do you actually think people working to draw a paycheck will act upon these high ideals? Normal people are worried about socially much more tactical individual concerns: roof, food, health, safety, raising children, etc. Normal people do not have a strategic radar that encompasses the manifold of society. How do you think we should couple this reality to this topic? How? Because there are a few people thinking about externalities and how to overcome to make sure that externalities don't overcome the benefits of innovation. But how do citizens take over this topic, and how do they participate? Can someone answer this question?
Can I give it a quick
Yes, sure.
stab at it? Because the issue how to talk to quote unquote normal people, so
Yeah,
excluding yourself, and
yes, absolutely.
it's something that I, of course, in my job I live routinely, because that's part of what I do, is to engaging with people who are not at all on their day-to-day life, asking these kind of questions. And my experience is that it is feasible, it is possible, but two things need to happen. The first is that we need to make these issues relevant for the daily lives of the people that we're talking to. And I think they are, because when you actually start talking to people, or at least when I talk to people, I realized that a lot of questions we're asking here about the limits of technology, the impact of technology, is something that everybody questions, or almost everybody questions. And the second thing that has to happen is that, of course, one has to, this is not a criticism, but one has to choose a language which is adapted to the context, which this is quite normal rule in human life. But I would question a little bit the assumption in the question, which is a very good question, that because people have other priorities, therefore they're not thinking about these issues. No, the point is, are these issues that we're talking about relevant for those other priorities? We don't have the time now to unpack all of this, but I would argue, yes, they're very relevant for all the other priorities: getting a paycheck, raising your children, having a roof, but you need to make that connection. Otherwise, obviously, people will say, well, sorry, if this is theory and I'm not interested in it. It is feasible, I think.
Maybe I'll just add kind of my viewpoint here, right? I think at the end of the day, that is the most important to all of us, right? I think each one of us here, we need to think about those basic needs. Once those basic needs are met, then we can have these higher level conversations. And I'd say, and the argument there for technology a little bit, and going back to my earlier point, right? We are at a place, there is a certain point that the world is at. And the technology sometimes moves in the direction where the most people are consuming it because they want it. And why they want it, is it helping them get to where they can get to in a better way? It's likely going to move the ball forward, right? So whether, and the want is the word, right? Need versus want, right? Those are all implications that, again, become hard for us to have a conversation around. But I'd say at a foundational level, people are consuming cell phones. Why are there more cell phones in the world? It helps people do things more easily and be able to kind of catch up or move their own personal lives forward to where the rest of the world is, right? So I'd say that's the viewpoint I have on that one.
Thank you, Tanya. Alexei, maybe?
Yeah, maybe I just wanted to inject a very simple example. I agree with what you said, Tanya. It's important to have these conversations. And just to give you an example of what we're doing at this moment, there is a big question that has no rules yet. Can a chatbot lie to its user? There are many ethical questions about chatbots. One of these is about lying. Can it say something that is not true? And if you think about it, this question doesn't have a simple answer. There are reasons why a chatbot would be actually able to do that or should be able to do that, and there are reasons why not. It's a new question. There is no law, there is no regulation, but it's something that designers have to work on today. How do we deal with that? Well, one of the ways to deal with that, of course, we should have some reflection on it too, but one of the ways is actually engage with citizens, talk to them, see what they think, see what the arguments are, what the positions are, and maybe that will inform our decision making. So right now, for example, at the French Ethics Committee for Digital Technologies, we're doing a public consultation on the ethics of chatbots with very difficult questions like this one, which don't have legal answers or any kind of answer yet. Nobody has been there yet. It's something totally new. So that is what we're trying to do.
Thank you, Alexei. So I think to sum it up, because we need to conclude now, we can see that first, it's the beginning of a discussion, actually. I think it's just starting for all of us, either in Europe or in the US, and we really need to continue thinking about what should be put in place either in companies, but also as rules or the implementation of rules, as you said, Andrea. And there are many things that exist, as you said, impact assessment, or what you're doing, Alexei, also regarding labor or the division of labor, ethical labor. There are many things, and I think that's what we need to do today, think how to put them in place. And that's the reflection we'll have maybe here during the whole webinar series regarding different limits of technological innovation.
Yeah, so with this, maybe Maddie, did you want to say a few words?
I just want to thank our incredible speakers for this morning's conversation. It was so engaging, so insightful. Obviously, I think our audience loved it too, given the amount of questions that we got. And thank you, audience members, for asking such great questions and for staying engaged. If you guys want to join the Hive Think Tank, I've dropped a link and I will do that again. And we also have an event next Wednesday. It's going to be at 11 a.m. Pacific, and it's going to be on ag tech, and it's going to feature an all-female panel of agricultural technologists who are changing that landscape. It's going to be really exciting and interesting, so go ahead and sign up if you're interested, and thank you all again for joining.
And one last word, maybe if you don't mind, I'd like to really thank all the individuals and organizations who supported us in this new adventure for us. Thank you so much for all the speakers for joining this first webinar. We're going to have other ones, and I invite you all to join us on January 14. We'll be posting the link. It's going to be about the investments limits to tech and about startups, if they are really building a better world or not. And we'd love to have you all join the panel. And also at the end of this webinar series, we're going to be hosting an event in Marseille, hopefully, if the sanitary situation allows, and we'd love to invite you all to join us in Marseille, October or November 2021. We'll get back to you. Thank you so much again to all of you for joining, participating. You've stayed till the end for most of you, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.